Now, this is our third session, and I think we had a wonderful sessions, and I'm very glad electricity and internet did not fail our fellow friends from Africa and Indonesia and all the places we had spoken to from Turkey. We had wonderful 2 sessions. We would like to continue now. This is session 3, and the chair for this is Dr. Anji Ben Hamed. Anji is a graduate of Sorbonne in France. She's originally from Tunisia. She's residing now in Bahrain. She's working in Emirates. So you have plenty of international experience here. Anji is a wonderful colleague. We have met her. She's spoken. She came to our UN conference, and I'm sure you'll have that memory because Petru is here. I can also, hello, Dr. Rawad also is here. I think our 3 speakers are here. Yes, we have the 3 speakers. So Anji is the chair. Anji, I will just help you from the back end, and the floor is yours, and go ahead.
Just Professor Alam, to make sure, 15 minutes presentation, and then we'll have 5 minutes given as the questions, or less?
I think if you can manage in 15 minutes, you will have up to, I think, up to have an hour discussion.
Okay, half an hour.
It's entirely up to you, Dr. Anji. In the past, you can either let them all talk and then you have the question, or you can do one by one like the previous session. It's entirely up to you. Okay. I will just supply you with any question come from the Facebook or this social network.
Sure, we'll agree on the approach, I believe. Let them present and then leave the floor for discussion.
Yeah, it is yours now, and I will step down. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So we'll start now. Yes, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Hello. I would like to welcome you all for this second session for the WASAD conference, talking to this year about the online learning during the COVID-19 situation. During the session, we'll be having 3 speakers. The first speaker will be Professor Manuel, who is Director of the Business Development at Cambridge Education Group, and visiting professor in Digital Learning, University of West England, UK. Professor Manuel is going to talk about the e-learning, but from crisis mode to the sustainable mode, and he's going to discuss the learning design in the post-COVID-19 era. Then we'll be having Dr. Rawad Hammad, who's lecturer at Computer Science and Digital Technology from University of East London, UK. His paper is about unlocking the future through using artificial intelligence in education, and we'll be also having Dr. Seema from the University of Delhi, India, and she's going to talk about the rising importance of remote learning in India in the wake of this COVID-19, the issues, the challenges, and the way forward. I'm so happy to have you all today in this session, and I would love to leave the floor to Professor Manuel to present his paper, and then we will move on to the following speakers. As I said, the session will be organized this way. We will have the presenters going through their presentations, and then we'll allocate time for the question answer session if you are having any questions to our, let's say, our guest speakers. So Professor Manuel, the floor is yours.
That's great. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. So let me share my screen. Okay, can I just check that you can all see my presentation?
Perfect, yes.
Excellent, thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Anji, for a very kind introduction, and Professor Alam for organizing another excellent event. In these times that we're living through the crisis, it's more important than ever that we all share good practice. So it's really good to be here, and excellent to see such good participation from across the globe. Really pleased to be here on this panel with Dr. Rawad Hammad and Dr. Seema Joshi. I've known both of them for quite some time, particularly Dr. Rawad. I've known him very long time, so it's really great to be here with them today. And thank you so much for inviting me here. My presentation, I will try to stick to the 15 minutes, although as we all know, academics always have got trouble sticking with time, but I will do my best. My presentation is about how we are moving from the crisis that we were faced with at universities earlier this year onto a more sustainable way of doing it, because by now it's becoming clear that this crisis is going to stay with us for quite some time. We don't know how long yet, but it's going to be longer than everybody expected at the beginning of this year. So how do we move on to a more sustainable mode? For those of you who already know me, I work at Cambridge Education Group here in the UK. I have worked at different universities over 20 years in Europe, in the UK, in Spain, in Austria. And all of my work is about online and distance learning and flexible learning. My current work is all about online programs of study, but I will focus a bit more today on what universities have been doing for their campus courses and how technology has been helping them, and what things could we think about for the future in terms of providing a better learning experience for our students. A very quick overview of what we do at Cambridge Education Group, very, very brief, just to give you an idea of the context where I'm coming from here. We develop partnerships with universities, and we help those universities to develop online programs of study who are accessible all over the world. So what we do is online education, and students can join from anywhere. And our take on online education is actually that online education should be just as good, if not better, than face-to-face education. We don't believe the online learning should be kind of a lower rate of quality to what you would experience off campus. So we pay a lot of attention on how we design our courses and the learning experience of our students to make sure that the education they're getting is of the highest quality possible. We now have got, across all our partnerships and our courses, we've got a larger postgraduate population than 90 UK universities. So it's a very large operation now. We have got students from over 75 different countries on our courses. And we have got very high retention rates, over 90%. That's important because it means that the learning experience is working for the students. We retain most of the students who come to these courses. So it is doable, it can be done. High quality online learning is possible, but you need to pay a lot of attention to design. So that's a quick overview about us. As I said before, the main focus of this presentation today for me is about the crisis that we have been living through at universities and how those campus courses are coping with that. So during this, the academic year that just ended, so academic year 2019 to 2020, we were hit by the pandemic right across the world. The UK, same as others, they suddenly around here in the UK, around March, April time, all university campuses had to close, all students had to go home, and the delivery of campus courses had to be very quickly moved to an online scenario. According to the UNESCO figures, over 1 billion learners' education got disrupted across the world during the academic year 2019 to 2020. So that is a sobering, sizable figure. We all know how important education is for young people, for developing our countries, for developing our societies. So when we have got a situation where 1 billion learners got their education disrupted, this is a very serious problem for the world, and something we need to pay attention to because of the importance of education. So all you have there on the screen is, what would very often happen on a campus. You have got a lecture theatre where a lecture is delivered, and all of that very quickly had to be moved online because students were not able to attend campus anymore. So that was what I call the crisis mode. Just very quickly, let's move the communication that used to happen face-to-face, let's move it online. So out of that, and there were a few months where that was done, and a few months then in the summer when universities had time to think about how they're going to enter the new academic year. So out of that, I think a lot of confusion has been generated. I keep hearing people talking about hybrid learning. and talking about blended learning, and some of them hybrid or blended, as almost as if they are the same thing. Now, for me, there is a very clear distinction between the two. So blended learning is a learning experience where some things happen in a context, let's say face-to-face, and some other part of the learning experience happens somewhere else, for example, online. So a blended learning experience is an experience that was designed to happen in two different environments. And it was designed as such. There was a conceptual mode of design. That's one thing. Hybrid learning, however, is when you deliver one learning experience that was designed as one context and people access it from different places. So for example, if you're delivering a lecture in a lecture theatre and you have got students with you there in that lecture theatre, but at the same time you have got some students attending online because that lecture is being broadcast. So that would be a hybrid learning experience. They're two very different things. And so I think we need to be kind of clear about what is it that we are offering to the students. So, and I think one of the problems here for many institutions has been the assumption that they made. So earlier in the summer, many institutions were assuming that the campus would reopen almost kind of as normal, and some face-to-face will be delivered within the constraints of the health and safety that we need to put into spaces at the moment, and all of that will be supported with technology. So that was the assumption. Now, what is the problem with that assumption? That the reality is that we're facing with at the moment is that COVID-19 infection is spiking again right across the world. Here in Europe, it's getting very serious indeed at the moment, and in the UK as well, which means there have already been a number of halls of residence locked down when the students have to stay in the halls of residence. And that planning for face-to-face tuition that was going to happen on campus has or is being rethought at the moment. People are looking at, is this viable? Well, we had assumed we were going to be able to do this, particularly this term between September and December. Is that viable? Is that going to happen? So the outcome that I'm kind of concerned about is that we're going to end up with more crisis mode delivery, because what we have to deliver to students this academic year is not what we were planning for, because we had assumed there's a certain element of face-to-face that was going to be possible, and that is looking like it's going to be a lot less than what was assumed. So we're kind of carrying on with that crisis mode where we have designed a learning experience that we are not going to be able to deliver in the way it was designed to be delivered. So that is the problem I think we're facing at the moment, that what was designed to be delivered to students is not what they are getting. And we're risking a number of things. If we continue this crisis mode over a long period of time, we're risking a number of things. The first one is that online learning is going to be even more defined as, well, it just doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work when you don't design the experience. When you have designed the experience to be delivered face-to-face and you suddenly move it online, that's when it doesn't work. Another thing we're risking is the perception from students that they're not getting the support that they need. Because earlier on this year, when crisis hit the world, everybody was under the understanding, well, this is emergency, we're moving things quickly. The students had, students were very understanding of that there were no alternatives, that this had to happen. However, now the students are probably going to start thinking, well, why are we not getting something better? Why has this been not planned better? So we need to start thinking about that. And I talked to a lot of colleagues across the sector about what is possible, what is doable, because it is difficult. We're in the middle of a crisis, and my advice is always, well, we need to go back to the principles. This is about learning design. This is not about if I'm talking to you face to face, I can just do that on the phone, or I can do that on Zoom. This is about learning design. What is the experience that we are designing for our students? And I think a very good model that I always start my thinking with is the one by Professor Diana Lorillard. She's one of the world experts in learning design. It's not just about online learning, it's about learning design in general for higher education. Professor Diana Lorillard currently works at the Institute of Education here in the UK. And in 2012, she published a very important book called Teaching as a Design Science, where she argues that we should be putting in place a conversational framework when we're designing our learning experiences for our students. And she argues, and I think this is really crucial, that learning in higher education is much about acquiring ways of seeing the world. When we get our students, they are adults already. Some of them very young adults, some of them much older adults, but they are adults. So they have got quite a lot of intellectual capacity that they come to us with, and they are very well prepared, most of them, and they're very motivated. So I think one of the key roles of higher education is actually giving them the strategies and the skills to be able to see the world in different ways. That's one of the most important things you learn at university. And this idea of a conversational learning design framework really aids that type of development. We need to think about discussion, adaptation, interaction, reflection. Those are the real concepts that drive learning in higher education. And why is this important in the crisis we're in? Because think about it, if we are moving all those activities that used to happen face-to-face on campus, we're moving all those activities suddenly onto an online environment where all of that becomes mostly a one-way communication between me just pushing things out through a Zoom kind of video conference activity. We are taking away all of those really crucial elements, the discussion, the adaptation, the interaction, the reflection. Where is that going to happen? If all we're doing is talking through a video camera to an audience of students, when are they going to reflect on what we're trying to get them to think about? When are they going to interact? When are they going to adapt those theories that we're pushing onto them? All of that normally happens on campus when we're discussing things with them. And a lot of those really important elements, they get lost when you simply move this onto a one-way communication on the screen. That's why we need to think about this carefully and how we design the learning experience that we are trying to put there for our students. So what would a journey to a sustainable mode look like? Of course, you cannot, in a couple of months, you cannot design a course that was meant to be done on campus. You cannot redesign all of that and produce a very high quality online learning experience for those students in that short period of time. You cannot do that. However, if you start by the recognition that face-to-face learning and online learning are different, that's the first thing we need to consider as academics. They are different learning environments. We cannot just switch from one to the other without making any changes to the design of our courses. What I would always say in terms of when you're moving from face-to-face to online, what you need to pay attention to? Structure. Structure, structure, structure. That's the first thing that you need to pay attention to, because the way people interact with the learning experience when they are at home on their own is very different to the way they interact with the learning experience when they are in campus surrounded by people. It's a very different way of interacting. So you need to design your online learning experience with a very different structure. You need to take into account, particularly in the current circumstances, that the students at home will have a number of different pressures on their time. They might be isolating, they might have a restricted physical space, they might not, if they are older students, they might have childcare responsibilities with them in the house. So the way in which they interact with their experience will be different. You cannot stick to the same timetable with the same level of activity that you were planning for when you were on campus. And the other thing that I think is really important when you're moving things online, break things up. The depth of engagement, there's plenty of research that's been done on this, and I'm mentioning there one of the latest articles I read by some colleagues that I know, Padilla and Armelini and Rodriguez. They just published this paper in 2020, but there is plenty of other research done that the depth of engagement and the effort that the learners put in is always higher if the tasks are smaller. What do I mean by this? What does that mean? So if you are scheduling a Zoom conference with your students that's going to last for 3 hours, it means that after half an hour, you're going to probably lose the attention of most of them. You need to break things up. The shorter and the smaller the task, the more depth of engagement that you're going to get with your students. So those are the 2 top tips: structure and breaking things up. Start by that. Obviously, there's a lot more that we could cover, but I only have got 15 minutes. I want to leave you with a quote. People ask me, does this online learning really works? It does. And I leave you with a quote from one of our students, Jenny Bennett. She's doing an MSc in dementia with Hull University. We work with Hull University. And during this crisis, Jenny works in the care sector. She's a mature student and she's doing this MSc part-time. And during this crisis, there were all sorts of things that were happening to her at work, in her family life. However, when we asked her, tell us about the course, is this working for you still? And that's her quote. She said, the course is fantastic. I'm learning so much. The structure, weekly learning activities really make you question what you read and see. And I point that out because I told you about how important structure is. Even the students realize how important that is when they're getting an online learning experience that has been designed well for them. Okay, that's all I have time for. I think I've only run out by about 1 minute. Really happy to be here, more than happy to answer your questions during the question and answer session a little bit later, or indeed you can contact me by email and I will be happy to be in touch with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Manuel, for this very interesting presentation and very interesting topic. And certainly we'll come back to you for a lot of questions during the question answer session. Now I would love to move to Dr. Rawad, who is going to take us to another aspect, which is the utilization and the usage of artificial intelligence now within education. So Dr. Rawad, the floor is yours. You'll have 15 minutes to make your presentation, and then we will move on to the following presenters to close with our question answer sessions. Please, our audience, prepare your questions for our speakers. There are a lot of things to say regarding this session. Dr. Rawad, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anji. Thanks, Dr. Alam, for the invitation. And thanks also, Professor Manuel, for the nice memory words. So welcome everyone to this session. I really enjoyed vast events in the past, and I will continue to be part of this community. Let me start my presentation now by sharing my screen first, and then putting the timer on to keep myself on the time. Okay, so we're going to talk today about a very good concept that we can use in order to minimize the disruption.
Dr. Rawad, sorry,
yeah.
can you use the, can you show the
sure.
slides? Yeah, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, is that better now?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Good. Thank you so much for the invitation again. So what I'm going to cover today, and next what would have been told to us by Dr. Manuel, a lot of disruption happening for our education and environment, so we'd like to minimize that. And that's the main reason why do we need to use AI, artificial intelligence, in education. I personally teach a lot of students in one module, and that kind of interaction, on-campus interaction, where we can talk to students, explain things to them, is not possible to happen online. Why? Because I can respond to one question probably in less than a minute on class or on campus. Now this cannot happen because I need to read the email, I need to prepare my reply, and then I need to reply to that student. And one of my modules, I have a lot of teaching assistants, but I have more than 300 students. And in that modules, we can't respond to students' emails. Even if you distribute the group to different teaching assistants, there are a lot of disruption that's gonna happen. Again, the uncertainty we have impose more restrictions on us in terms of delivery, in terms of structuring our modules, and so on. And bearing in mind what have been also said by Dr. Manuel about the structure and keep the task smaller, you need to keep the balance between the smaller task and the deepness of the knowledge that you need to convey to students. So in order to solve all of these kind of issues, there is no key, I would call rocket science that will solve all of these kind of problems, but we can try to use advanced technologies in order to make our learning experiences more fruitful with students. So here the AI will come to us. Now again, futuristic solution, again focus on the sustainable development goal, mainly the one related about quality of education, and also the number 8 goal, decent work through our environments. Again, a lot of challenges are happening during the last couple of years or last 1 year now. We need to focus more about what we have in terms of the sustainable development goals here, especially for goal number 4, which is quality education, and also goal number 8. So I'll focus on goal number 4 about quality of education. What we have done here in order to maintain our work with students is just to look at the student, how they are learning in online environments. We managed to look back, evaluate what we have done on campus before this pandemic. We got some figures from national student surveys, from other kind of student impacts, other kind of discussion, other folks group. We've documented that in different ways. And then we managed to say what we are doing at the moment on campus and online is not at that same level. Why? Some of that is back to students. Some of this is due to the environment and platform technologies we have. They are not very flexible. Some of these kind of challenges are also back to our way of working as lecturers. So I'm teaching, for example, software engineering module. I haven't designed my module for online delivery, okay? We used to go to campus, teach our student, and student interact with us. We group them into different group. We ask them to interact with each other. All the tools we have at the moment cannot allow us to do that. And if the tool allows us to do that, the other platform or other infrastructure most likely is restricted. So we have some broadband issues at home, and similarly students have that. You can't ask students to embed a lot of technologies in their house because they are not prepared to work from their home in the way that they are prepared to work from campus. They can't fit their cameras all the time on their laptops. They are not ready to sit at home in a very comfortable way and talk to you when you talk to them. Again, there are some other issues related to the privacy and the way we manage classes online. And the solution for some of these problems is to use advanced technologies like artificial intelligence to know more about our students and also to customize our work procedures, our work strategies to improve their learning experiences. So we came up with what we call here disconnected. These are the key challenges we have: disconnected educational system, because we have, I think, most of the universities now, they are using Microsoft Teams or Zooms. Okay, they are using Moodle or other virtual learning environment. They are using their own educational system like student record system and other stuff. And they are using a lot of e-portfolio systems. So these systems are disconnected. And even if they are integrated technically, there is no such features to recognize that Rawad as a student in software engineering module have been interacting very good in that module. So let's try to get that kind of knowledge and recommend different resources for him from the library system. There is no such feature for that. And there are a lot of disconnectivity between these systems. So we need to solve that issue in a way or another. Again, that issue is going to replicate more if students are doing, for example, undergrad and then they move to postgraduate student. We lost all the information about them and so on. Stakeholders are totally separate. We don't work together as we have been doing on campus last year or the year before. I don't meet my colleague. I have a teaching team, big teaching team in one of my module that I've never met. We do some online meetings, but that online meeting is not going to reflect and transform all the skill that we are looking for. Also, the communities we have a big TA communities now at the moment at the university. They are not also gaining the benefit of joining the academic environment and getting more skills. So our graduates at the end of the day, they have a lot of disruption even when they left the university and they go to work. They have a lot of skills that they need to learn. And this has been discussed with one of the key industry that we've been working with. Okay, so just a reflection about the differences between student and between the generations. So we have different generations here without referring to the age of any one of the audience here. There are different generations here. And these generations are just very, very high level differences between student having some kind of ages. So people from 60 to 75, I guess I can use my pointer here. Yeah, so from 60 to 79, they tend to have some kind of political transition, whether Generation Z, which has been born before 2010, they like the mobility, the multiple reality, social network, and so on. I am personally reluctant to add my social networks connections to the courses I provide to my homepage on the university, but some other new academic or student, they would love to have that. Now, this is not to say this is wrong or right, but this is the differences that we have between different generations. Again, the behavior between people who have been born between the 1940 to 59, as someone who's more of idealism toward the people who are going to undefined identity or being more realistic and from Generation Z. This again, also different if I just move this picture as well, in the consumption of the information that we have. So that difference is just a very high level of abstract. Again, if I go to my class, while I have just at least 50 students in my class, I'll find a lot of differences between those students. So what I can do, I can't capture this information because usually when you go to class, we tend to see some differences. When we use AI technology, we record each interaction with any of the system that the student use. And as a result of that, I can know Rawad is using the system most likely in the afternoon session rather than in the morning session. And based on certain algorithms, I can make some kind of deduction. Possibly he's doing some work, he's a part-time student, or he has some certain issues within his environment that do not allow him to do his job in the early morning. Now, that's not the issue, because even attending the session online, whether it's online session, attending the session even in the evening or the afternoon, that's not the main issue. The main issue is Rawad is struggling to understand some concept, and then our systems that we have at the university at the moment, and the majority of our universities are not clever enough to see Rawad has tried this quiz 3 times, but he failed. Why did that happen? Can we rectify this? Can we provide him with a customized learning experience to improve his learning and his interaction with the systems? Now, again, there are some other students who just not struggling to learn some concept. They are trying to find peers to work with. And here is the more brilliant role that AI can play with. We have a new feature in Microsoft Teams that we used, and I Zoom, this is a breakout room, where we try to have a big class, and then after the big class, I'll give the floor to students to discuss some issues, to discuss some problems, and then go out for small groups, discuss things, and come back to me. Now this is working randomly. There is no base for that. There is no way to say, student, we need to divide you while we maintain the differences between you. We need to have, for example, a group of 5 students where one of them will be, let's say, a high professional. He or she has some good experience in industry. Another one have a good project management skills. And another one should have some kind of different skill or some other lower capabilities. So in that kind of variety between students, we make sure that there are some skills to be transferred between one to another. So there is no base for dividing student to group. And again, also, this is a time-consuming process. If I work with students and ask them to divide themselves into groups, they will tend to work with the same group every time. And if that happens again, then this to be like a one-man show if at the end of the day. So these are the key differences that we will try to find between students, and why we need to do that in order to make sure that their learning experiences are better online rather than going to campus. Going to next slide. We know that there are a lot of issues we will face in the market in the very couple, let's say, next 5 years or 10 years. We have some factors that we've listened in the market that 30%, 35% of skill demand for job across all industry will change in 2020. And that was just a study published by 2018. Now we're already in 2020. There is a slowdown because of this kind of pandemic, but we know that there are big changes now in the market. Even I've seen a post last week, I guess, that they want to hire someone who's working in software engineering, and the education required is none. So you don't need to have any degree, you don't need to go to any school, you'll just be given a task to do it in order to get that job. Now again, that might be not ideal. Also, it's not valid for all other jobs because this might be a lower kind of programming skill that is required, but this is going to be more and more in the future. So are we going to stop educating people and say, this is just only what you need to do? You just need to go to work and produce the work that you've been trying to do. I don't think this is the reality of what we'd like to do. The reality of what we'd like to do is to equip our educational system with a proper way to capture student differences, know what we are after as an academic organization, know what we want to offer to our students, and also employ AI techniques to customize our learning experiences to students. So I design my course in this way. So let's say this is a PowerPoint presentation, lesson number 1 in software engineering module. And this in its current design, it should be delivered just only in one way. But if I design this in a very flexible way, that kind of design need to be changed and adopted by AI techniques to make sure that student X learn in certain way, while student B can group within a team in order to learn because they tend to learn in a social environment. That's something that we are doing in AI. Again, one of the issues that we face and we are facing in a very, very disruptive way at the moment is responding to students' comments and questions. And to do that, we have developed a framework for chatbot in education. We have used multiple platforms like Alexa and other Microsoft Azure. And the main reason for that is just to minimize the intervention done by the instructor or the professors. We need the computer to respond to the key questions. So if I have FAQ, frequent asked questions, for example, and that FAQ is prepared and published somewhere, the intelligent application can get these questions, keep them in the memory, and then when student when the student asks the professors about any kind of issues related to the module, submission date, these are called kind of basic questions, then chatbot can respond to that. Now there is a key issue here. This kind of chatbot is good for customer service, is good for other stuff, but they are not good for learning purposes because they don't retain information about student and they have no kind of pedagogies to support these algorithms. This is another area we are trying to resolve at the moment by using natural language processing, where we analyze and understand the languages. And at the moment, I'm supervising one of the PhD students who's investigating different kind of understanding for the languages and try to look at this from a learning perspective, not just only because some of the questions may be sent in a very different way if we are talking in a business domain or if we are informally discussing any other point. So the main issue here is just to look at this problem from an educational perspective and put the pedagogy at the center of that, while learners are the core and almost everything here. And this is what we are trying to do in our solution. So our framework here, I keep shifting these kind of pictures, so I'll download them here. So all of the AI techniques that we'll be trying to do here just to allow our student with a better experience, okay, and make our solution scalable, because I can't teach 600 students, but using AI, I can probably minimize that disruption. So our solution will focus on 5 things. It's a framework using AI in education. We'll focus on people, on our student, on our lecturers as well, to help them scale, and also we'll develop our processes in order to make sure that our processes fit for our purpose. The main issues we have at the moment, whatever process we have at the university, they are not flexible enough. For example, we have the support process. If students have any issues, they will email the support. I can't submit my assignment at the moment. And then they will say, okay, log a ticket and we'll come back to you within 3 to 5 working days. What will happen if the student have a submission deadline tomorrow? Okay, now you might say he or she should contact the support earlier. That's true, but that's not happening for all the students. And again, if the deadline is tomorrow, I'm not obliged to, I'll do my work today, but the deadline is tomorrow. So I should be able to do it. Now, again, these kind of issues with the processes, if we are on campus, I can go to what we call student hub or student support, and then they will fix it to me while I'm dealing with them face to face. But if they have a very long list of student tickets in their system, they will not be able to respond to that. Again, our processes, if we modify our processes, we need to go back to the goal of our institutions. I think the model mentioned by Professor Manuel is having some kind of partnership in order to open the borders for other organizations to collaborate, for other students to join the university, for other academic to be part of the university, is something we need to look into. Again, institutions also need to understand and recognize the need to invest in AI more and more. At the moment, we are trying to buy black box technologies rather than invent our own solutions, okay? And that will reflect also on the data that we are using, the privacy, and also the kind of GDPR rule and so on. And at the top of that, we will have the technology where we can say, yes, we will be using all of these kind of black box software systems, but we will be adding our own inventions in that way. And that's something we need to do. We are trying to develop at the moment the chatbot. We have done some implementation for that. We also develop a prototype for capturing student characteristics and customize the learning strategies for learners based on their capabilities and their goals. But this also just is a part of the research that we are doing. We hope to get some kind of tangible outputs maybe in the next few months based on the experiment that we are doing. So here are some description for the things that we have. So again, just to make sure time here, AI can help us a lot in solving the problem that we are trying to solve here. Face-to-face education is good. Online learning is good as well, but if we spend the time and the effort in order to plan for it and make it properly designed and publish. So future direction, we're going to more of technology support here. We will try to work collaboratively, use some kind of blockchain technology, and also try to get rid of the focus on what we call on-premises, the focus to on-campus activity. We will try to have this kind of hybrid approach. We call it in the University of East London dual delivery, where we can deliver the content to students on campus, and at the same time who are joining us, whoever joins us using the online platform, they will be able to learn, and they will be able to get the benefit, should be in the same way that the student on campus getting. So we will try to invest more and more to make this kind of hybrid learning environment possible between two different options. Student spaces will change a lot in the future. So students are expected to be sitting at home, sitting at cafes, working their own ways, trying to use technology to collaborate with each other. I've seen some students working on teams in different places. So a group of 5, 2 of them on campus, 3 of them are working from their homes or their cafes and whatever they want. And then the result and the outcome is I can't say at the moment it's the same level of on-campus group and work. But again, the skills that they are gaining at the moment are really, really good skills. They learn how to work with each other in a group. they learn how to collaborate with each other, they learn how to put their priorities and how to make their discussion more fruitful. On campus, you can see in one scenario, you'll see the one-man show who's leading everything. Now, this is not possible with a hybrid approach between student on campus and online. So this is just only a quick presentation, 20 minutes now, and I think this is over, time is over now. So thank you so much for inviting me to present this presentation. I'll be happy to answer your questions, and unfortunately I'll leave around 2, so if there will be any questions, I'll be happy to take them on board if that's the case. So I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rawad, for this very informative and insightful presentation. You took us through different levels and different aspects of the remote learning, of the online learning. You took it from different perspectives. I like the beautiful triangulation where you have presented the concept of online learning from the student perspective, from the institution perspective, and also from all the stakeholders' perspective. If you are going to leave, and if you would love to receive your questions now, I can open the floor for the questions, because certainly we have a lot of questions to ask about this concept of artificial intelligence and how it's going to add value. And certainly it's going to add a lot of value for education post-COVID. Let's talk after the COVID-19, because we needed to have that forward-looking and to be very proactive and to prepare ourselves for the future. As an exception, since Dr. Rawad is going to leave, we will open now the floor for discussion, and then we'll move on to our third presenter, who is Dr. Seema, to close with her for her presentation, and then we'll come back again to the session, to the question answer, because we want also to come back to Professor Manuel and also to Dr. Seema for the questions. So any questions, our audience, to Dr. Rawad regarding artificial intelligence, online learning, and this, let's say, new situation and the new normal?
I think you got Dr. Alexandra raising her hand.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this lovely presentation, very informative, Dr. Rawad. So, and very appealing as well. From my personal viewpoint, I'm teaching on huge modules, and I would love some of your innovations or the ones that you're currently working. So please keep me in the loop. I'll be very much interested on those 300+ modules. But the question that I have is this whole approach requiring a wider conversation, if you wish, and transparency in terms of students and how they are part of those new developments and those new initiatives, and are they really a part of the conversation in what is important shift into a completely different approach to learning, and what we could definitely be able to discuss in either kind of a realm of, is this going into the idea of surveilling students, or is it our idea of showing care and really caring for that experience, and that's why that personalization is important. So what do you think about that?
So yeah, thank you so much for this interesting questions. I think students also, one of the differences between students is the way that they perceive the information and the way they understand why we implement these kind of changes to them. Some of them are understanding that this is just only the last resort for us as academic organization to keep them and retain them in the university. Some of them are considering this as the best innovation that we are doing with them in order to help them learn more and more and achieve their goals. One of the key things I found with my students as well, they interpret things differently. So when we give them some kind of directions, make things clear to them, step 1, 2, 3, 4, and a lot of these steps are not related to the subject that we are teaching them. Step just like, organize your way to how do you want to have your group, some kind of criteria for group. If you've been given a task, how do you want to analyze that task? Look at the objectives of that task before you start the task straight away, and then link this with the learning objectives of the module. So there are multiple layers, we call them hierarchy here. So instead of going to lesson number 5 and see this is the lesson number 5 learning objectives, learning objective, let's say number 1 or 2, there is a task here. Look at this task a little bit before you try to solve this. Link it with the learning objective for this lesson and for the learning objective of the whole modules, and see what kind of knowledge that you need to gain about that. These kind of what we call metacognitive skills, we are trying to focus more and more on now when we are developing our e-learning content. To be honest, before what we have done in order to move to online learning, the majority of our academics were just trying to present this and deal with the student based on their interaction and based on their questions and answers. There was no capability, I would say, or no need to capture what kind of needs students they have at the moment from one perspective or another. Can we link students together in order to help each other in order to develop their skills? I receive a lot of questions from students as well. They have some students in their group, they don't need to interact. And I told them, this is the benefit of COVID-19. And when they asked me why, I said, okay, now you've been offered a job now, okay, and you have a company, a team of 10. There is no guarantee that the 10 people in your team will be collaborating with you. Are you going to reject the offer? Are you going to leave your job, or will continue working with them? They said, we will continue to work with them. Okay, and this is the same scenario here. On-campus activity allowed you to avoid that, okay, move away from those students, try to regroup with other students. Now with online learning environment, you have to face that issue early enough in not in your career, in your education. So you need to find some workaround in order to work with this. We recognize this with the number of hits of the student using the system, the number of their interactions. And we also develop, or we didn't develop that. There is a multimodal learning analytics tools where we can look at the eye tracking system and see where the students are focusing on something, or they just attend the session just for the sake of attendance and getting that attendance ticked box. But
and do they know that?
to be honest, this is just a prototype. We have a lot of ethical issues to approve that. And not all the students. We have just set this on campus for a couple or 3 students. They were happy with that. And these are, the students are studying technology, so they would like to learn by themselves about that. But to be honest, any kind of development, any kind of adoption for these technologies, we will face a lot of ethical issues, especially our institutions are not ready. And I'm not talking about UEL here at the moment or my university. A lot of other universities refuse to have these kind of what they call privacy related technology. So this is one of the issues I guess we need to solve at the institutional level, and especially if we make this adoption optional, then we'll see more and more students joining the whole scenario. Hopefully I answered your questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rawad. I can see Professor Natalie who wants to ask a question. Please go ahead. Professor is raising his hand. Professor Natalie, are you here? I have a question in here from Dr. Seema. So she said, which artificial intelligence intervention you have been considering in your research on education projects? Meanwhile, waiting for Professor Natalie to join.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a good question. We use a lot of different technologies. One of them is the ontology. Ontology is the way in AI to capture the student information, and not just student information, anyone who's using the system, and put that in an abstract level that is completely separate from technology. So we do that when we, for example, have, these are technical jargon. If we have a database, for example, or we have any legacy system that we use at the moment without AI, we capture this kind of information. But the problem is they are embedded within the technology. So what we have in this layer is to have 2 different layers: technology layer, which we don't care about what kind of technology you use, and the ontology will be separate in any other layer, in a different layer. So we capture information about student, about professors, about whoever part of this kind of community, and then at the end of the day we get that kind of customization. We call them recommender system, and these recommender systems work for students, work for academics, work for group leaders like teacher assistant or teaching assistant. We recommend resources, learning resources, for example, and also we recommend peers. So if I should This is a task that needs to be done in a group. You need to group in a member of 5. Then I can see some kind of recommendation for the peers that I would like to work with. These are things that we can use in AI. Also, analytics, learning analytics using machine learning to understand the student behavior, understand what kind of expectation we receive from student. These are different things that we also use in AI, in addition to the natural language processing, using chatbot, basically.
Thank you. So, Professor,
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. And thanks very much, Professor, for your presentation.
Thank you.
And I like the way you brought in the issue of design science in terms of delivering to our learners. And you did also compare two SDG goals, that is SDG 4, providing universal and inclusive and lifelong learning versus SDG 8 that deals with the decent work and workspaces. And you also did say that if you are going to deliver training to students face-to-face, the kind of work that you have to do is probably a lot more than what you will do when you are using online or virtual systems. So I'm just asking, I wanted to get this from you. Don't you think there is a contradiction between achieving SDG 4 and SDG 8 during COVID-19 pandemic, and what's likely to happen thereafter?
I wouldn't say kind of contradiction, but these are big challenges, and there are no clear answers for these kind of challenges. To be honest, we can say these kind of issues that I've just tried to touch today, they have been researched for more than half a decade, okay? And also the way that we learn as students, so I'm just turning on my battery is about to die here. So the way we learn more about how do we learn, how do we achieve our learning activity is different. So if I look how students were receiving their education 50 years ago or 30 years ago, and compare this with what we have today in school, you'll find this completely different, or not completely different, but to a very large extent it's different. So what we are trying to do at the moment is trying to keep student or minimize the disruption and minimize the gap between the work experience and life experience and their education. And by no ways, if we are saying we are doing this online education, we are spending less time to prepare content. I myself, when I shifted to online learning, I probably put the double time to prepare my content and maybe triple. And that's the same for students. My main worry here is the transferable skill that we have when we go to campus cannot be compared with online. So transferable skill, you talk with your colleagues about so many things. You learn about their professional experience. I know in many groups that students who are working in Amazon, in Microsoft, even in simple, let's say simple jobs, they are not very sophisticated jobs. They learn a lot from their work environment. Now, again, Microsoft last month announced that Microsoft company will allow everyone to work from home permanently. Now, the main question here, what about the transferable skill? What about the behavior of the employees coming from one good employer? What is the role of the model in that company? And this is similar to our student. If you haven't met your student, how do you know if they've learned a lot in terms of their personality, how they develop their skills? And this is not just related to the subject you are teaching to them, the way that they learn. If I go to the university and I see my lecturer or my professor coming every day or whenever we have a lecture, 9 a.m. sharply, then this is a message for me that you need to be very timely when you deal with any person, okay? If I see someone who's working always on deadline or by deadline, then this is also another thing that we see and we learn from it, and even indirectly, but we learn from it. Now, this is all missing in online environment. So again, there are a lot of challenges on the online, and I wouldn't expect these challenges to disappear in the next couple of it's not next couple of years, the next 10 years or something. There will be more challenges because the kind of pandemic we have, the kind of learning environment, the challenges that we have will continue more and more. So I think what we can do just to investigate and keep ourselves, develop a technology, prototype, test, and then rectify what we have learned from, based on what we have learned from the experiment. A lot of AI tools at the moment are in the prototype. Unfortunately, we gained some fund, develop tools, do some minimum experiment. Sometimes we don't do that experiment, and then we keep that tool on the side, and then we move to another problem. But we didn't get the full benefit because we do not put that technology in place for a year or two. Let students experiment with that and then make that extended experiment work for all of us, because we analyze the result and make sure that we have learned everything from what we have done. This is something is very challenging in the AI at the moment, because we don't have that kind of sustainability in doing AI project. It's just funded by one or two organizations. Once the project is done, that's it. So there's a lot of gap here in transferring the lessons we've learned from one project to another.
Very good. Thank you so much, Dr. Rawad. Any other questions? So I have one comment so far. First of all, I can see everyone is really thanking you for this very informative and very wonderful presentation. You have mentioned the World Economic Forum skills, and I have in front of me the very latest one, which is just published about the 2025 learning, or let's say top 20 or top 10 skills for the future. And I can see no one of them is related to content, and as you said, to knowledge. It's all about analytical skills. It's all about creativity. It's all about innovation. It's all about leadership. It has to do with the technology use, the resilience, stress tolerance, and the flexibility, and also problem solving and ideation, which are all, as you said, acquired somehow through the what we are going, as you said, transferable skills. It requires sort of interaction from the students. Also, you talked about Generation Z. Today, we are expecting to have Generation Alpha. Remote learning is not only for universities, it's as well for schools, higher education, which is more challenging. Now, from your perspective, as an expert in technology, artificial intelligence, what would be your advice to, let's say, top management, those who are taking the lead or leading higher institutions or leading schools or leading any educational institution to prepare themselves for the future? Because as I said, today we have the Generation Z. They are more of Google children's. Tomorrow we will have more of Generation Alpha, who are more technology oriented. What would be your advice? What are the potential scenarios that we may face, and to be ready, to be ready for that as educational key players, or let's say, as I said, leaders within the educational field?
Thank you so much. Very big questions here, but I would summarize this because, depending on technology a lot, also we will have a shallow or superficial. So if you look, for example, at Facebook, you look at the discussion that it's good for discussion, it's good for talking between people, that's fine, good. But then if we tend just keeping this kind of chit-chat approach, there will be no learning, no deep discussion between people. And this is what we face at the moment. If we look at if we look at the institution, higher education institution, let's say 30 years ago, the philosophy of learning was just to give everything that we need to learn at the university. And then when I move to the work, I should be ready there. They should test me fully. And then if I'm ready to work, then they will hire me. Now, this is changing now. We have less learning at the university and more learning at the workplace. And if we continue doing that, we will minimize the role of higher education in our life, which is, in my view, is wrong, because we need to keep students learning not just only knowledge, not only transferable skill, the critical way of thinking. You need to critique what you have been learning. You need to see how I'm thinking as a lecturer here, and criticize me and provide me with your own view, not just only about technology, about the way we work with each other, about the philosophy of life. And this is why we learn. This is why we send our children to school. If we just want them to learn about how to calculate mathematical equations and do X and Y and Z, we can watch any YouTube videos, and we can do this kind of resources review, and then we recommend these resources for them. No, that life is much, much bigger than, the technology. Technology can try to solve some of the issues that we need to solve, and this is the main thing that I would recommend. All of these kind of leaders need to draw the boundaries between where technology should work better, where human and interaction and kind of social life need to work better as well. Any successful manager, if I had to say that about in my life, I didn't see any successful manager who's very brilliant in his knowledge, but he has no social interaction with his team or her team. And that does reflect how people work with each other. We need both things. We need to keep the balance between our learning, our life, our social activities, and between technology. If we keep using technology and pushing technology for everything because technology can do things better for us, again, we will feel at some point we are disconnected because technology cannot do everything better for us. So a lot of big debates here, and I'm happy that this presentation kicks a lot of questions. And I think many of these questions could go for a lot of recommendation paper or white paper later on that can be published and guide some of our institution on how to develop better e-learning systems.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank
Rawad, for the feedback, for the answer, and for everything. So now I will move to Dr. Seema, also to hear from
Dr.
her.
Anji, sorry to interrupt you, Chair. Just one quick thing to let you know. Tomorrow, there will be a complete session on artificial intelligence, data mining, and machine learning by Dr. Rawad and Dr. Hammad, I think in the 11 o'clock. So it's a 1.5 hour, complete 1.5 hour short or mini workshop on. So I think it's important just to draw your attention. He will be doing this for 1.5 hour tomorrow.
Wonderful. This is amazing. And we encourage everyone to attend this session to get more knowledge and to get more insight and information about artificial intelligence and all these new technology. Thank you so much, Dr. Rawad. And
Thank
now
you so much.
Welcome Dr. Seema to hear from her about this online experience from her perspective within University of Delhi. Dr. Seema, the floor is yours.
Yeah, good morning, good evening, Professor Anji. I'm very thankful to Professor Alam for giving me this opportunity to make a presentation on such a topical issue. And in fact, during this pandemic time, he has got us busy by giving us various topics over which we could think over and contribute. So I'm very thankful to Professor Alam. And let me start with my presentation. The topic which I have chosen for today is remote learning in India amidst a pandemic, issues, challenges, and I'll be discussing in brief the way forward also. So as all of you are aware that coronavirus pandemic has wreaked havoc and brought world to a halt. Though this pandemic was detected early, but there was delayed response of the authoritarian state of China, and which has wreaked havoc across countries, causing hundreds and thousands of deaths. And it has hit the rich and poor country alike and has disrupted several facets of life, including education, entertainment, and work. Indeed, India was not an exception. And as all of you are aware, that if the Wall Street crash of 1929, which is termed as the Great Crash, contributed to the Great Depression of 1930s, and if US lender Lehman Brothers in 2008 fueled the global financial crisis of 2008, COVID-19 has been pointing towards the inevitability of the global recession of 2020. For social scientists, as you know, it has exposed fragility of global society, governance, and world over. For economists, it has been signaling onset of recession. And for e-businesses, which all of us have been noticing, it implies surging online orders, which are hinting at adaptation of, okay, is everything going on fine?
Just screen. Dr. Seema, can you make it on full? Yes, great.
Yeah. So, as I was talking about the social scientists. What I've been saying was that it has exposed how fragile global society, governance, and world order is. And for economists, it has been signaling that there will be, there is onset of recession. For e-businesses, surging online orders. and which are saying, which are hinting that we have to adapt new norms. And for educators like us, it has been giving us an implicit indication that we have to transit to remote learning through online platform. So that is why in this background, my topic is very, very important. And if we go by the estimates of UNESCO, by May 4, 2020, when I was writing this article, 1.6 billion learners constituting 72.4% of total enrolled learners across 177 countries got impacted by that time because of temporary closure of educational institutions in an attempt to contain the spread of COVID. And this closure of educational institutions in developing countries like India, it has placed unprecedented challenge on all stakeholders in education sector, that is administrators, teachers, students, parents, caregivers, to ensure learning continuity and also to bring semblance of normal life. I would also like to mention that this pandemic is often compared with World War II, but one of the, which was a military conflict. But one of the major differences between World War II and with this pandemic is that if World War II involved and caused devastation in 35 countries, this pandemic has affected more than 213 countries out of 240 countries in the world. Therefore, different countries adopted different strategies to deal with this crisis. Some countries went for no lockdown, for example, Sweden. In India, there was complete lockdown initially, and slowly, we are phasing out the lockdown. Countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, they adopted non-pharmaceutical initiatives, including social distancing and travel restrictions. Some countries like Japan, they declared an emergency. And similar was the case with China, as was the case with India, that initially it went for complete lockdown and then slowly it started relaxing the restrictions. But one thing is obvious, that outcome of closure of educational institution remains the same for every country which has been impacted because of this pandemic. And the outcome is that there is learning poverty, which most of us have been facing. But we cannot leave anyone behind. And what empirical studies have been telling us, empirical studies bring us to the notice that there has been learning poverty in countries like India, and which is leading to human capital deficit. And this is, I'm talking about the case prior to the pandemic. There was learning poverty in India prior to pandemic, and now because of discontinuation of this learning, human capital deficit is there, and it is expected that if this human capital deficit gets aggravated, then this can mar the possibility of recovery of not only India, but many other countries in the world. Therefore, it is very, very essential that we have to close this human capital gap, and which will not be possible unless and until countries switch over from face-to-face learning to remote learning, because we have to ensure that learning goes on even during the time of pandemic. I will talk about in this slide about the higher education landscape in India. And I would like to mention that India is having one of the largest higher education system in the world in terms of number of institutions. And it is third largest in world in terms of number of enrollments, next only to China and United States. If I talk about 1819, the year 1819, India is having a vast network of universities, approximately 993, more than 40,000 colleges, and 10,725 standalone institutions. But the quality is questionable, which we have been questioning even prior to the pandemic. In addition to higher education institutions in the country, we are having open and distance learning system. So in a way, I can say that we were not, it's not that remote learning is something new to India, because India is at the present, we can boast of having one of the largest distance education system in the world, which is also second only to China. And this all started in 1960s. But what happened during this COVID-19 is that we had to immediately, we have to switch over from face-to-face learning to remote learning. And what we observed was there was wider use of technologies such as Google Classrooms, Google Hangout, video-based collaboration services like WebEx, Zoom, Loom, Skype, Teams, etc., and learning management system we have been using to ensure that learning gap does not arise. There is no doubt about the fact that this crisis has brought to the fore the hidden potential of the online learning system in the world. In fact, there was a study done by KPMG and Google in 2017, which said that India is set to grow to USD 1.96 billion by 2021 through this online education system. And it has been mentioned in that study that convenience, flexibility, and low cost are the key motivating factors to adopt online channel of learning. But nobody knew that now COVID-19 will become the fourth key factor which will motivate us to switch over to online teaching. I would also like to discuss in brief about the emerging education approaches across countries during COVID-19 pandemic. As you must have observed, and I have mentioned in my study, that different countries tried different approaches during this pandemic. Some opted high-tech approach, some went for low-tech approaches, and some went for no-tech approaches depending upon the resource availability. If we talk about Vietnam and Mongolia, the country made intervention in the form of text messages in school and university level. Similarly, countries like Bhutan, Brazil, and Kenya, they were using social media platforms like Facebook, WhatsApp, YouTube channels, etc. And this was happening especially in low and middle income countries. Some countries like Colombia, Dominican Republic, India too, Kenya, Fiji, etc. They were using broadcasting media like radio and audio instructions, again to ensure that learning crisis should not get aggravated. We in India use digital platforms, as I mentioned earlier also, and countries like China, Italy, France, Germany, they have been leveraging potential of ICT to ensure learning continuity. Now, this abrupt shift to digital learning platforms has brought to the fore various issues and challenges in the higher education sector in India. Whether it is pandemic time or it is normal time, all of you will agree with me, the expectation from the education system remains the same. First and foremost expectation from the education system is that content should be available. As Professor Manuel very rightly mentioned, that content is very, very important, and second important factor is structure. So in second point, what I've been mentioning is that remote teaching plan is very, very important. What would be the pedagogy of teaching? That is also very, very important. Fourthly, preparedness of all stakeholders, because even the teachers have to prepare new learning plans, as has been discussed by the two eminent professors who made the presentation before my presentation. The preparation of all the stakeholders is very, very important. Then connectivity infrastructure in the form of uninterrupted Wi-Fi services is very, very important to ensure that learning goes on. Then there are cyber security issues, and there are psychosocial support system also, which students and every stakeholder has been requiring during the pandemic, because most of us are staying inside, and there are several mental health issues which are cropping up. Now, what we have been noticing in countries like India is that there is inadequate provision of e-learning content. I must mention that in a higher education sector, there is a lot of content which is available with India, but prior to this COVID-19, you'll be surprised to know that not many of us were aware of the content availability. So not only availability of content, which is very, very important, awareness about the availability of content was generated by the government during this pandemic, so that people can make use of that content to check the learning gap. Then the stakeholders like teachers, administrators, they were not clear about teaching methods. Teachers were not prepared how to make use of Microsoft Teams, how to make use of Zoom or Loom or WebEx. This all we have been learning during this time of pandemic. And then training issues also cropped up. It is altogether a different matter that during this 6 months period, what I would say is that online training has been going on. This FDPs have been going on for training the teachers. But initially there was confusion and stress amongst the teachers, amongst the parents, amongst the administrators also. Then we also notice is that poor quality of connectivity infrastructure is there. Though IT revolution came in India in 90s, but you will be surprised to know that in education it could not make much mark. It is only during COVID that, more and more intervention in the education sector with this IT system has been maintained. So we were worried about the digital divide, first digital divide as well as second digital divide. Then data security issues, cyber security issues. These government has been trying to resolve over the period of time. Then there are attitudinal issues also. As you know, there was a question raised by one of the professors that whether face-to-face learning is better or, e-learning is better. I think this question too has been raised by various trade unions in the country also, because those who are used to face-to-face teaching, they have been saying that this online learning or technological intervention in the form of AI will threaten the very existence of the teachers. So there are attitudinal issues also, and they don't want to, invest on learning new techniques, new methods, or new learning information systems also. So these attitudinal issues need to be resolved, and for that, government has been coming out with various kinds of resolutions and various kinds of interventions over a period of time. Then there are psychological issues also because of social isolation and distancing, which are arising, and for that, again, online helps are being offered to the students and to the teachers, and we are mentor-mentee groups we have been forming so as to ensure that not only physically students should remain well, but at the same time their mental health issues should not get aggravated during this time of pandemic. Here in this slide I have shown the various online resources which are available and which were made available by the government by 2017, but many were not using that. It is altogether a different matter that during this time of pandemic we have all started making uses of these learning resources. So then the next question is, what is the way forward? So the first and foremost task is that one of the important stakeholders, that is teachers, they have to ask themselves one big question, and that question is, do we believe that education is the only way to achieve prosperity and economic growth, and the trend of digitization should not be reversed? If our answer is yes, then I say this is the high time for formulating digital strategies and contingency plans for higher education sector. And why I've been saying so, because one of the participants raised the question that what is the need, for how long this should happen. I was reading one of the articles which has been written by an epidemiologist in 2009, who says that this is an age of pandemics. So COVID-19 may be the first pandemic which we have been facing. And if we go by that article, and that article is by Larry Brilliant, who was behind eradication of smallpox in United States, he says that we will keep facing these pandemics in the times to come. So the lesson which is there before all of us is that now we should start preparing our contingency plans and digital strategies so that if the next pandemic comes, we should be well prepared to face that challenge. And therefore, blended model we have to develop. Whether we will make use of it, whether we'll be using it in 40-60 mode or 60-40 mode, this is our choice. This choice will vary from country to country. But the thing is, this blended model, we should prepare it. This is the message of this COVID-19 as per my understanding. And therefore, we will have to reorient the education sector by reforming education, keeping in with the requirement of the 21st century, which already has been highlighted by one of the professors, before my presentation, that, in future, the kind of, requirements which are upcoming, we have to prepare our children, we have to make our workforce future ready, keeping in mind the requirements of the 21st century. And one important thing which I was noticing in case of, China, which most of the countries will have to opt during this pandemic, is that they will have to organize teleconferences to plug the communication gap, which China has done very well during this time of pandemics. And I will also like to mention that I have, given the case study of China in my paper, that China has made use of artificial intelligence in schools during this pandemic, which various countries have been thinking of introducing. It has already done it. Then we will have to strengthen the internet infrastructure in the country so that learning goes on in an uninterrupted manner. And as Professor Alam in the beginning mentioned, that this is the time for collaborations, this is the time for partnerships. So we have to enter into new and new agreements at national level, at regional level, at international level also, so as to check the so as to mitigate the loss of learning during this time of pandemic, or in any other pandemic which we face in the times to come. There is a need for mobilization of all major telecom service providers to boost internet connectivity, because India is a very big country. There are very prosperous regions, and there are very underprivileged or backward regions also, tribal regions also. And if we want to ensure learning in those areas, then I think this kind of mobilization of telecom sector providers is very, very important. I must mention again, I am complimenting China has done it during this time of pandemic. And one of the major differences between India and China is that China is having a uniform education policy throughout the country. China is also a big country like India. In India, we don't have common, we don't have one system for the entire country, and that is why there is a big challenge before Government of India. So strengthening online security through collaboration between Department of Telecommunication, online platform service providers to ensure cyber security and to check theft of intellectual wealth. This too has to be done by the government, which China has already done during this pandemic. Again, another major step which has been taken by our neighboring country. Then resolving various issues related to accessibility, equity. I'm mentioning both first digital divide, second digital divide, and lack of communication amongst the stakeholders, that is administrators, teachers, students, parents, to ensure better learning outcomes. I think this another step which is to be taken by the Government of India. And I would like to conclude by saying that a cyclical approach to education in emergencies like COVID-19, comprising of 3 components, preparing, coping, and recovery, is crucial. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Seema, for your presentation, for all the information that you have provided to us about the educational system in India and how India, they arrived and they managed to face this COVID-19 pandemic and to switch from normal learning or face-to-face learning to the remote learning, with all the challenges and issues that you have faced, and that ongoing process and that ongoing learning process in order to overcome all these challenges. So now I would like to invite Professor Manuel for the question-answer session with you, of course, and I have in here in the chat few questions that I will mention, waiting for the rest to interact with us. I would like to ask this question for both of you, since you have mentioned the common point between your presentation and Professor Manuel and also Dr. Rawad's presentation, that you have highlighted the hybrid model. You said now we need to adopt the hybrid model, and the hybrid model is really relying on technology. Somehow we need to have technology. And I can see in here a question about, okay, it's good to have technology, it's good to utilize technology, but how can we, let's say, learn this technology? Because we need to think about acquiring skills to utilize technology before talking about the infrastructure. I mean, the utilization of technology. This is one. And the second part related to technology, which is, what about the poor countries? Technology means infrastructure, means investments. And some poor countries, they don't manage to do that. How to face this big challenge? As you said, both the future is for the hybrid. The future is we will continue using technology. How to face that? What are your recommendations? What are your point of view in here? You and Professor Manuel, if he is with us, and would like also to comment on this point.
Okay, I've got a few things to say. If you don't mind, Dr. Seema, I'll start and you can
sure. You can go ahead.
Yeah, it's a good question with lots of ramifications in there. And you earlier on, you asked Dr. Rawad, what should we be doing in terms of the new generations? How do we get them ready for this? Well, my answer to that question would have been, actually, we need to focus on the teachers first. Because our new generations are coming with a particular set of skills that have been developed because of the world they live in. And what I see very often in higher education is lots of academic members of staff who are not ready for the tasks that we know we need to put them in front of our students. And that's no fault of their own. It's just simply that their development as lecturers took place in a different world. And some of them don't have the capacity, don't have the time to engage with these things. So I think institutions, they need to focus on the professional development of their staff first, so that we create learning experiences that are suited to the education that our students need. Then you asked a very important question about what about the countries that have got less resources. I think international collaboration is needed more than ever. We need to think about how more prestigious, wealthier institutions can partner up with other institutions around the world and create good quality education that will be accessible to more people across the world. Partnerships, collaboration across countries, across institutions, I think are very needed. And we all play a part in that. And I think, you know, fora like this one are very important to share experiences and start those collaborations. One last thing I would say about hybrid learning is that that idea that you can deliver the same session to students who are with you in a room and others attending at the same time online doesn't normally work very well. The thing that I would argue more for is to create different learning experiences that are designed to suit the context best, so that you design a learning experience for your online learners and a different one for your learners who are attending. And of course, you can mix and match, and particularly doing group work with them, but you need to think about if this learner is an online learner, you need to deliver them an experience that is suited for that environment, rather than put them into a room through a computer screen, because it's likely that a lot of interaction, they're going to miss out on that.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Professor.
I would like to add a few points. What I feel is that in developing countries or even in poor countries, you know, what I find lacking is that sense of personal responsibility is also lacking. What I have noticed in case of India also, and therefore I recommend individual, institutional investment. At the same time, partnerships are very, very important. What I have noticed, especially in case of India, is initially there was resistance when the COVID-19 hit the country. There was a resistance amongst the trade unions of teachers also, because they were thinking that how to shift from face-to-face teaching to online teaching, and they were also fearing that this will lead to job losses also.
Yeah.
Right? And then what I have noticed over these 3 months, when the pandemic continued, then people slowly started making them understand that maybe we will not be able to do without that. And now what I have been noticing is that for example, in my college, there are approximately 250 teachers. What I noticed was that in one of the months, approximately 40 teachers went for FDPs, for this faculty development program, making their personal investment, which was not happening earlier. So COVID-19, it is said that necessity is the mother of invention. So people have been understanding now that the time has come when then they have to invest on themselves, or otherwise they will remain irrelevant in the market.
Yeah.
And therefore this sense of personal responsibility, which is generally expected that a teacher will have, and this should have been there, it is altogether a different matter that over a period of time, somewhere, some compromises have taken place. So I think COVID-19 has played a very important role in creating that awareness amongst the teachers. Therefore, individual investment has to be there first of all. Then institutions too have to invest. Yes. And then we have to enter into partnerships so that we can grow by learning from each other. And I remember Professor Alam had organized one of the conferences. The topic was relating to sharing knowledge.
Yeah.
So
I believe it's the right time now to maybe reinforce or to stimulate the transfer of knowledge, whether across countries or across regions. And I remember Professor Alam before talked about the partnership public-private sector. I believe also to ensure an equal opportunity in terms of education, because unfortunately in some countries we saw that there is a kind of difference between those who are acquiring knowledge or those who are enrolled in private institutions with those who are enrolled in public institutions. Private, they invested too much. They took one step further into switching quickly and let's say providing all the needed resources to ensure a beautiful experience. But however, some public institutions kind of couldn't have that enough flexibility in order to do so. Maybe now, as you said, it's time for to support this partnership, public-private partnership across countries between different institutions.
Yeah, not only, Dr. Anji, I'm just intervening, not only we require public-private partnership, we require partnership of academia and industry also.
Yes.
And
yes.
we require, partnership at international level also.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
At the international level, so we required partnership from different levels, different perspective. So let's say to support this experience. Any other questions from our audience to Professor Manuel and Dr. Seema? Any question? Maybe a closing question from my side to Professor Manuel, since he talked about moving or shifting, and also Dr. Seema, since she's talking about the hybrid model. He said moving now from the crisis mode to the sustainable mode, assuming that this new hybrid mode is going to be the new normal for us. So even post-COVID-19, we will be having this as a sustainable mode. And you have raised a lot of challenges related to infrastructure, related to interactivity and the student. And I would like to shed the light on one point, which is the engagement of the students and the interactivity online, specifically when we have a large audience. Sometimes we may have classes with more than 100 students. How to ensure that, which is a very challenging point, in addition to many others like assessment, like the way to assess specific skills, like the soft skills and so on. Since we are moving towards this as a kind of reality, we cannot escape that. And also we have to be prepared as educators and also as maybe parents, because we have children who are going also to continue being within this experience. Now, from your perspective, what can we do in order to ensure engagement, to ensure that the students, they are with us, not logging in just for attendance and they are doing something else? How to do that from your perspectives? What are the things that we need to work on to improve this hybrid experience, which is supposed to be our future and our reality in the coming years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent question. And I think the first thing we need to do is, as I mentioned in my presentation, is go back to basics, learning design. So exactly. if I'm designing a course, first thing you need to think about is, what do I want the students to learn? So by the time they finish this course, what do they need to learn? And within that course, week by week, this week, what do I want my students to get out of this course this week? And once you have clarity about that, then what you need to think about is, okay, so if the student is in class with me, what do I do with the student in order that they get there, that they learn that I want them to learn this week? But if the student is not with me in the class, they are at home, what do I need to do in order to help them get there? And those two things are different. So the learning you're designing is the same, but the way in which each student will do it is different. That's the new normal. That's what we need to adapt to, because our kind of old way of thinking was, we had the learning experience that was one is students with us, and we were designing for that only. What we need to adapt, the new scenario is that we know what the student needs to learn, so depending on where the student is going to be, that will be delivered in a different way. That's the new adaptation I think we need. And that links to the idea that I think we need to develop our academic staff in order to help them get there. They're going to need support because this is a new way of doing things. And if we do that, then the issue of having very large groups of students goes away. Because if you have got a very large group of students online, but you have design experience by which they're working together, you're giving them challenges, and they're working together in their own time, and then they're coming together at certain points during the week online, then you are creating a very rich learning experience. And from my experience with online programs, that can be extremely positive for the learning experience. Because in some of our programs, we have got students from over 20 different countries in the same program doing the course at the same time, but they're completely dispersed across the world. When you get them to work together, the learning experience is really rich because each of those students brings their own context onto solving the problem, and they learn from each other so much. So if we get them to work together, this really produces a lot of positive developments in the learning experience. But like I said, what we need to do is actually think about what the student is going to be and how they're going to learn what we want them to learn, depending on where they are.
Thank you, Professor. Seema, if you'd like to close.
Yeah, I would like to add, because since you have been asking the angle of the parents, so and as well as the teachers, so what I feel is that COVID-19 has once again brought to the fore the importance of family values. Family culture, family values will play a very, very important role in the times to come. And being parents, being teachers, I feel we have to inculcate very strong value system amongst our children so that they become self-disciplined, because self-discipline, self-regulation and self-responsibility, these are the key, important factors which are going to play a very important role in the success of our children, our future labor force. Reason being that since jobs, the kind of jobs which have been emerging, there is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, whether, contract jobs have been emerging. So children are under tremendous pressure. In addition to that, as I mentioned, when I read, Larry Brilliant's article of 2009, I was, got worried so much about the future generations. And then I was thinking that how to make them resilient. And in order to make them resilient, what I've been realizing is that if this is going to an age of pandemics, our children have to be very, very resilient. So they have to have self-discipline, self-control, self-regulation, self-responsibility, and this cannot happen without due intervention from the parents as well as the teachers.
Thank you so much.
I think here lies the answer.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, my dear guest speakers, for this wonderful session and for all the informations and let's say details and insight that you have provided to our audience. I really enjoyed this session and all let's say input and all the things and the details that you have provided, and I believe that all the audience, they have enjoyed the session as well. Thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you so much, Professor Alam, for giving me this privilege to share this wonderful session. Professor Alam, so the floor is yours now to continue with the program. Thank you so much all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anji. Thank you very much for the three speakers. I think it's a great pleasure to listen to them. And I think, as usual, the three have never disappointed us, and they will never disappoint us. They always excite people. And this conversation will continue. I think it's, before we just close this, I think we all need to give them a big round of applause because they have done remarkably well. Now, it is just 2:45. So we're going to take our break for the session 4. I know this is a long day. I'm not sure about people in the other word, but here it is the difficult time in conferences, particularly after people have their lunch. This is where you really struggle. But I am confident the three speakers or the three papers we're going to see after the break and then going forward. As you can see, we're going from Indonesia, that side of the world, and we're going now to this other side of the world. So we are just going through the UK now, but we also have two distinguished speakers going to join us. I think one of them from Germany, Gabriela. I'm not sure, where are you, Joyce? Are you in Brazil or in Germany?
Brazil.
Oh, so we're going to have Brazil, Germany, and the UK. Distinguished speakers, Professor Farida and also Dr. Bashiri. Dr. Bashiri from Cambridge, he's tried every time to join us. He's a consultant endocrinologist. He's in the hospital. He's still making every effort to speak. He sent us the presentation and the video, but I can see him. He tried. He said there is no good internet in our wards. I mean, you can see another COVID challenge in our hospital. So we're going to take a 15 minutes break, and we will put our slide as usual. This is a break. Call it whatever you call it. Even, I don't know where, whatever part of the world it might be lunch, it might be dinner, it might be coffee. So we'll see you in 15 minutes. And that session will be chaired by May Idris from UCL. I think they're all here. So we will see you in 15 minutes.
Always remember, if we all help and do a little bit, it will make a big difference.